MPS family? It's your girl, Renise Washington, aka Wellness Specialist, better known as Wellness Queen. And so this week we continue on our series, right? We talked about physical wellness, social wellness, and now we're going to get into emotional wellness. And so one of the things to consider about emotional wellness is being mindful of how aware we are of our emotional cycle. Are we just responding to things? Do we take time to break down situations and process? I'm asking that because, as most of you know, I'm going into buildings, doing climate visits, and when I'm talking with fellow MPS staff, employees, I do realize that for some of us, it isn't always natural to process and break down a situation, right? We always start with how we perceive something, which is our most automatic response. But for some of us, we're not processing, does this thought confirm the bias I already had, right? Confirmation or bias, confirmation or confirmation bias, one of them. Does this also challenge what I think? And so it makes me uncomfortable. Really trying to have some conversations that help us reflect on what it means to be self-aware, right? So our emotional wellness is tied to how self-aware we are. Are we able to regulate our emotions? Do we know how we are feeling, right? Emotional literacy, being able to name something, which is why when we check in, I always say, no to the okay, all right, and other undefined terms that don't really present perspective, right? But the other thing about that is noting, how are we interacting with the environment around us? Do we perceive everything to be a gotcha? Does it feel like there's no way that we can actually be successful? Are we willing to examine how we think and how it plays on our emotional capacity and how it may be limiting our ability to see perspective or different solutions in a situation? I know this is not as fun as circles. I know it's not as fun as brunch, but it lies in the middle of trying to accurately assess, am I perceiving something right? Or are some of my emotions or some of the lack of processing of an event causing me to think that something is happening that isn't? And I'm not saying that your experiences aren't valid, and for some, perception is reality. But I do want us to be thoughtful of how we're intaking the environment around us and ask questions to, is this really happening or is this just how I feel? Thanks, MPS, for checking in. We're just doing some tune-up work, and this is thoughtful work. So ask yourself some of these questions and see what answers you get. Thanks, MPS. Wellness.